Yeah, you guys sound great.
We can hear you. Great.
Yep.
It's fixed somehow.
Awesome.
All right. Sorry about that.
You guys are getting too many calls, right? You guys are very popular these days.
It seems so.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to hear from Iryo. Thanks for joining us, guys. I know it's late there. I believe, is it 11:30 at night?
Yes, it is. That's why we're in the dark here.
That's why you're in the dark. Where are you guys located? Go ahead and give us a little introduction to you guys and to Iryo, please.
Right. So welcome to Slovenia, where Iryo is located. So with you tonight are myself, Vasya, Dominik, CTO, and Luca, our main blockchain advisor. And yeah, it's almost midnight here, so we'll try to be look our best for you tonight.
You guys look wide awake. I think I see some coffee being drunk. Is that Dominic over there drinking coffee?
Green tea. Keeping healthy.
Very nice.
Cool. I'm on water.
You're on water, and we got nothing on the left side. Okay. Now, if you guys could give us a little bit of background on Iryo, help viewers understand your project, what made you decide on EOS, so on and so forth.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a couple of things really. We've for a couple of years we wanted to do something in healthcare IT. For various reasons, because we think that the state of healthcare IT is pretty bad right now in terms of security, user experience, and so on. And then secondly, we think that the blockchain technology brings some interesting things to healthcare IT. And so that's how we got started.
Vasya, what are those interesting things? What are the benefits that users are going to see?
I think there's two things, I think. So one is that blockchain technology brings a new level of trust and transparency in systems that before were completely centralized. And then the other thing is the whole token economy and community-driven development and adoption and so on, which I think is also very much needed in healthcare.
And how is that? So what is your target market? Are you looking to start with Slovenia and then branch out from there? Or do you have a certain market in mind?
I mean, the solution that we're developing is really a global one. We think that it could be used anywhere in the world. Now, we don't want to go primarily into the United States. We think it's a much better approach for us to target the developing countries first, prove a couple of things there, and then move from there. That's also why we're doing the pilot project, the one that we're doing, but maybe a bit on that later. However, at the same time, we think that it is possible in the more developed markets to target sort of the long tail customers, which is the smaller clinics, specialist doctors, and so on. So we're in talks with for some deployments in that area as well.
And what is it that keeps you guys passionate? You guys are here with us 11:30 at night over there. You guys are wide awake. What is it that makes you so passionate about healthcare? Do you guys have a background in that, or?
Some people on the team have worked for healthcare IT vendors before, but I think that the most interesting part about healthcare in general is that everyone in one way, shape, or form is a participant, if nothing else, as a patient. And one of there's this purely business side to it, which says that in a couple of years the healthcare IT market's going to be worth 200 billion.
Wow.
So it's definitely a big market opportunity, but I think it's also on the other side where, on average in the world right now, we spend 10% of our GDP on healthcare. In the States, I'm sure better than us, that is closer to 1/5, so 20% of GDP goes to healthcare. And at the same time, we believe that the IT in healthcare has not made much of a difference in terms of improving it, making healthcare more efficient, more effective, and so on. And so we live in a world where we're dreaming about machine learning, artificial intelligence, and so on, but we don't have the data there yet, organized, stored in a way that it would enable all of that. And getting to a point where we can use artificial intelligence, machine learning, then we can start making healthcare more affordable. And otherwise, we're going to have really great healthcare and no one will be able to afford it. So obviously nobody wants that. And we want to change that and where we are and how things are going. And we think to be able to change that, we really need to go back to the basics and do something with the healthcare data. And so that's what we're doing with Iryo.
Is there any challenges that you guys have regarding regulations in the spaces that you're looking to roll this out on?
Yeah, so it's, again, initially we're doing a couple of pilot projects in the less developed markets, also because, we're not hiding that fact, also because regulation is less strict there. But it's an interesting question because we think that legislation, on one hand, it's a challenge because healthcare, for some good reasons, is a very regulated and conservative industry. And so on one hand, we need to do a lot of compliance country by country. That's also part of the reason why we're looking at the hard cap that we have. So why we're trying to raise that amount. But at the same time, the legislation we think is an interesting vector of change to come. So, we have this thing called GDPR in Europe coming in effect in a couple of months. And it's basically one of the things with GDPR is that it makes organizations that hold personal identifiable information, which healthcare data is, liable to data breaches. And if a data breach occurs, then that organization can be fined up to 2% of the yearly revenue. And so what we are seeing, especially in Europe now because of GDPR, is that organizations are realizing that holding the data is a toxic asset. And so especially healthcare providers are realizing they're not in the business of IT security. They're not in the business of protecting data. They're in the business of providing the best possible healthcare. And so while the legislation is a challenge, it is also a driver of change, we think.
I like the way you guys are approaching this, and we're also very curious about your technology and your blockchain itself, and how you see, and also how you got involved with EOS. EOS is a very public chain, and oftentimes public records, or rather health records, cannot be public; they have to be private. So we're looking to hear more about your technology and how you're looking to implement some of those solutions.
Right. So I'll start, and then I'll hand it over to Luca to explain a bit more on EOS and why and how and so on. So. One of the things that we are defending quite strongly with Iryo, first of all, is the question that we get asked the most is, you're putting data, healthcare data on the blockchain. And that's not something that we are doing, and we don't believe that's a good solution for anyone who says that. We think that they don't know what they're talking about, and it's a simple reason. There's two reasons. One is that putting any amount of a lot of data on the blockchain is extremely inefficient, but more important than that, you shouldn't be putting personal identifiable information onto a public blockchain. Some say that the way around that is to encrypt everything and then put it on blockchain encrypted. But again, blockchains are designed in a way to be eternal. Encryption is not eternal, and if at some point we are able to crack the encryption that we have, then basically all the data we're putting on the blockchain is going to be publicly visible to everyone. So what we are doing and utilizing blockchain is basically using it to decentralize the most important parts of the healthcare IT system, which in our view is the access control list. So basically using the blockchain public ledger to store the information on who has access and the rights to view or add a specific piece of information for a particular person. Because we think that in centrally run systems, that is basically where there's the weak spot and where there can be abuses from inside players and so on, because you always have these administrators of systems who can do whatever they want inside the system. They can cover the tracks, they can change the logs and so on. And so that is really the part that we should be decentralizing and putting on the blockchain. It shouldn't be the data itself. Now, for why we chose EOS, I think, Luca, you have a good explanation.
So basically, we're putting access list to the blockchain, and the most important part of this is the revocation list. Basically, if you have like centralized database, whenever you revoke access to anybody, you have to trust the centralized server that they will not delete this piece of information. So if you if you do it on the public chain, then it's verifiable everywhere. It's timestamped, and so in this way it cannot be abused. So why we choose EOS? Basically, we looked at all the systems like Ethereum and Bitcoin, and of course they cannot serve this. Mainly, so we decided on the system when basically the white paper comes out, and the part that I really liked was in the paper when they say that you will be able to basically do your own app and verify only this one. So you will not need to sync all the smart contracts on the EOS, but you will be able to verify just your smart contract that you're interested in. So in that way, we can have like very nimble chain, and we can deploy the full nodes to verify all the access permissions that are issued, and these nodes can be in basically all the clinics that supports enough bandwidth for that.
So basically, we end up with really lightweight nodes, and we have fast transactions, low latency, and cheap transactions. Right?
Because I mean, if we will do it on the Ethereum, we will have to sync all the data, all the crypto keys, everything, and that's, I mean, that just wouldn't work. We cannot put this stress on actual clinic in deployment in real life.
Interesting, very interesting. So this type of data is obviously the most sensitive type of data. So you're really looking at having that encryption piece really down packed, as well as the smart contracts in order to facilitate your data sharing and data access. Is that it?
Yeah. So basically, there are two parts, two levels, basically to the whole security thing. First is the access control. So actually, who has control? But that's just a list. There are signed messages when you share it to somebody else. But that's not all. What we also do, we encrypt the data and before putting it on. So basically, we have zero knowledge, and we deploy it on 3 nodes. So first node is your phone. It's not really a node, it's storage on your phone. The second one is basically a storage node in clinic, and the third one is backup to in the Iryo cloud. They're all encrypted. So this part happens off-chain. But these storage nodes, whenever doctor access them, they go to the public EOS chain and they check that everything is okay. And then they serve the encrypted data to the doctor. So doctor now gets this encrypted data, but he cannot read it yet. What he needs is basically my re-encryption key. So what I can do, basically the data is encrypted on my public key, and then I need to issue a re-encryption key to his public key. And he can then use this when storage nodes serve him data, he can then use this and re-encrypt the data to himself. And this is how he can then see the plain data on his device. So basically, there are two ways we're doing. First, it's encrypted, re-encrypted key, and then access list on the blockchain. It's a little bit.
This sounds like one of the, so we talked to Nathan James last week. We briefly brought you guys up and talked about Iryo. He mentioned how current centralized systems do a similar style. Is that right? In terms of the doctor's side, it has to be re-encrypted on each side when the data is sent?
No, so basically what we can do, there is this proxy re-encryption. The NuCypher firm is doing it. It's basically what you do, you just issue a re-encryption key, and then server can re-encrypt from one public key to second one. So server can do the re-encryption, but cannot read anything. And he can then serve this re-encrypted data to the actual doctor, and he can then use his private key to open it.
Well, and there's another thing. So, traditional healthcare IT vendors, so they might be, I'm sure they're doing some encryption. The difference that we are doing here is basically in who has the the private key to encrypt the data with. So in our solution, it's always the patient who has the private key, and so all of the data that belongs to the patient is encrypted with that patient's private key. Public key, yeah. So basically, without the patient deciding to share access and the data with someone, nobody can access it. And so it's sort of turning upside down the whole approach, where it's not just the patient who legally owns the data, but it's also the patient that actually controls the data through those mechanisms.
And that's a good point. As somebody, Katie Roman in the chat brought that up as well, trying to get access to her own health records. I guess the patient would have access and would own that private key for the data.
Yeah.
There was one additional aspect that security-wise that we achieve with New Cipher and this proxy encryption is that by encrypting in a traditional way, you would basically share the secret key with other people. So they both need to know that key. And with proxy encryption, what we can achieve as well is that they both have their own secret key that they can use to exchange the data. Plus, additionally, it's really easy to do revocations and key rotation and stuff like that regularly without affecting the workflow in the hospitals and stuff like that. So it's from that aspect really secure as well.
And we know EOS is also working on forgotten passwords and stuff that would help usability. So I guess this is in the case where.
Okay, yeah. So what they're actually doing, they're basically giving the backup key, but you basically just switch the key from one account. You switch from one public key to second one, right? So you do this. So you basically don't do. You don't actually get your private key back. But in our case, we actually need our private key back because the data is encrypted with it. So it gets a little bit more complicated, and it cannot be done on the chain. That part cannot be done.
Interesting.
But we're working on that solution as well, basically how to recreate the private key if you lose it, because we think that, again, UX of that is really important. So if you give out the people private keys, obviously it brings a lot of benefit, but then you also need to take care of what happens when they lose the key, because people we're not that good with storing the keys.
Sure.
Good.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. Let's switch gears a little bit, Kev. Did you have some questions?
I think we should definitely talk about token mechanics, tokens. That's what everybody's most interested in usually. But let's go towards the tokens, and let's talk about what the tokens will be used for and how they work in Iryo.
So there's a couple of use cases for the tokens. So the first one is sort of the use case for added security. And so any healthcare provider that will be or wants to be a part of Iryo network. So basically the whole network is permissionless. So it's in essence, it's open for anyone to join. But the one level of protection is that we will require a certain staking of Iryo tokens. So if any healthcare provider wants to join the network, wants to start adding data for patients, they will need to stake a certain amount of tokens. Now, the exact amount we don't know yet because...
But no reward. They don't get any reward. So it's like access key for the software.
So yeah, basically it's, a healthcare provider would have to stake, for example, $5,000 worth of Iryo tokens to be recognized as a legitimate player in the system. So it's sort of a first level of protection that not just anyone could join in. They have to sort of be invested a bit. Secondly, we use the Iryo tokens for ways to enable emergency access. So, if we design a system where patients need to approve access to their data, that patient might be unconscious, and then the doctor needs to get access somehow. And so we're working on a solution how to do emergency access, where basically we take the private key, we break it down into a couple of parts, and then two of those parts need to come together to form the emergency access. And so the patient could give one part of that key to his GP, one part of the key to us, and neither us or the GP would be able to access the data unless both of those come together. And so in an emergency scenario, if someone requires emergency access, they would ask the GP and us to put those two pieces together. But at the same time, as a security guarantee, we would ask for a deposit of Iryo tokens to the patient's address. And then after that's done, we give the other part and then we grant the emergency access. And so in that way, we basically empower the patient that, there might be some exploits tried that way, but there's a deposit there that would stay with the patient if there was an emergency access that turns out to not be an emergency access. So that's use case number 2. And then use case number 3 is that we believe that this is a solution that can be used globally. And so through time, there will be a lot of valuable information in the system. So it would also be possible to give access to that data to researchers, and the Iryo tokens would be used as an incentive to the patients, the data holders, to share data and information for specific reasons. And so the tokens would be used as an incentive for that.
That's pretty neat. Go ahead, Bluejays.
Yeah. So I mean, what gives the token value in the ecosystem? I'm just not clear on that.
Right. So basically, the whole idea is that the healthcare providers that join the system need to stake a certain amount of tokens, and so the higher the adoption, the more of the tokens are staked. So we sort of have a higher demand of the tokens while the supply is unchanged. That's sort of the economics.
And also basically that pays for the storage, at least for some free storage, and we then get 1% inflation to basically cover more and more storage for free, as much as that will basically be worth. That's one. It's basically that you will be able to do research on your. So basically, researchers will be able to access your data on your phone. So basically, on your phone, your data is not encrypted, right? And so they can give you, like, they can ask you, hey, are you willing to participate in our research? And then you can basically take those tokens and say yes, and the whole research will happen on your phone. So these are like use cases, and we hope that the tokens will stay in the system and that people will have more and more of them, while the whole number stays the same, basically.
And let's talk about the airdrop as well. And there's been we have a few community questions about the airdrop and about the reasoning behind parts of it, and also the process itself. Let's go back to the airdrop. What is the purpose of airdropping the tokens onto EOS holders?
Sure. So I mean, the number one reason why we wanted to do an airdrop is basically it's a marketing campaign to spread the word about Iryo and what we're doing, and to get people interested and motivated and so on. So that was the main motivation behind it. At the same time, we think that with airdrops, a lot of times they get exploited through bots, through various bad actors trying to just extract as many tokens out of the airdrop as possible. And so we wanted to fight against that. And one of the things that we did was we said that we will lock in certain preconditions in place before we go public with it, to try to prevent bots and spammers and exploits. And so what we did was, before we announced the airdrop, we took a snapshot of the account, which was on March 1st. And then we said that any person who had at least 0.1 Ether or 1 EOS in their wallet can register and can participate in the airdrop. And we think that that thing actually worked fairly well. Because if we didn't do that, then if we would say that's the requirement, then some person would create 100 new addresses, send 0.1 Ether to every one of them, and then represent himself as 100 people. And so we'll get 100 times more tokens as someone who didn't do that. And so we wanted to protect basically everyone who participates through that. Now, the other thing that we did was we said that because we had that precondition and because we didn't pre-announce it, and we didn't pre-announce it precisely because of that, we also gave this sort of fallback option, because there might be some false positives. So there might be some legitimate people out there who want to be in the airdrop but didn't have the balance because they either had the tokens on an exchange somewhere or so on. And so we said the fallback option is the reference code. So if you get the reference code, and if 5 people join that fulfill those preconditions, then you get the same amount of tokens as anyone else. What happened then was that it became really popular, and so people started sharing those reference codes in different groups. And obviously, one of the groups that is really important for us is the EOS community, so all the EOS Telegram groups. That's also part of the reason why we did the airdrop, because we're, I think, the first healthcare project on EOS, or I mean, at least publicly committed. And so we sort of wanted to be in touch with the EOS community. Once that started happening, people started spamming the reference codes on some important EOS Telegram groups, and we asked multiple times people to respect the rules of the groups where they are and not to spam and so on, which didn't happen. So it kept going on for a day or so, and so some of the EOS communities got a bit angry over that, which we completely understand. I mean, it's completely fair. And so we sat down and we rethought what was happening, and then we said that we can ask people not to do something, but they kept doing it. So we basically, after day and a half or 2 days, we then canceled the reference code. So everyone who used them up to that point was still valid and recorded. And then for the rest, just because we couldn't control how much people were spamming it, we decided to cancel it because it had some unintended consequences, basically.
In a way, it was a very successful marketing campaign. But yeah, as you mentioned, some unintended consequences there. Now, we've also heard about the 5% airdrop quantity. Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so we're doing a couple of different things. So we have 5% of the total token supply that will be distributed through airdrops, but we have 3 different campaigns. So one campaign is 1% of the tokens will go to the attendees of our meetups. So we're currently doing a roadshow. I just returned from Asia. We did one in London, in New York. There's one coming up in Toronto. And basically, to anyone who is physically there on the meetup, we give them, they're eligible to register for an airdrop. So that's the 1% that we will be giving out to a cap of 1,000 participants. We have an additional 1%, which we're going to be giving out after EOS mainnet is live. And so that will go basically to any person who has an EOS balance. But that will...
based on weight. Basically, more EOS you have, more
Iryo tokens you'll get. But that will only be possible, obviously, after EOS mainnet is live. And then the 3% is the campaign that I've just described. And so basically for that campaign, we have it capped at 22.5 thousand participants. We have those preconditions, and that will be basically airdrops on Ethereum on ERC20 still right after the ICO, as well as for the attendees of the meetups.
And have you guys gone through the venture capital fund with Block One, or have you approached any of the other venture capitalist firms?
Yeah, so we had a couple of conversations with Block One, and again, that's one of the questions we get asked quite a lot. We talked to them. One of the things that we didn't agree on, or was unsynced, was basically the timeline. So we already had a pilot project underway. There's a development team that we need to finance and so on. and we basically needed to get additional funding as soon as possible, while Block One was just in the process of setting up cooperation with VCs that will help support the app development.
That was before the announcement.
Yeah, that was before the announcement. That was just before the Everpedia Airdrop came public. So we talked to them, and they basically said that they can't work on such a short timeline, and that if we need funding now, that their advice is not to wait for them, which is basically what we did. And then we decided that, we still have a line of communication open, but we said that we're going to go ahead with the ICO, do that through proper crowd sale, simply because of the difference in timeline.
I respect the way you guys went approach this. Clearly, you're driven to achieve your goals here, and you guys are just going to push ahead and do what it takes. And this Block One, have they given their blessing in terms of do they care about ICOs? Did they advise against it? Did they say we wish you would wait, or what was their response?
One of the things is, so I don't want to make public any of the stuff that we've discussed with them one-on-one. Primarily because I think that they, once you raise the amount that they've raised, you paint a big target on your back, and so they need to be very careful about what they say publicly or not say. I think when we were talking to them, they were very supportive of what we were doing. Their view is that they understand that we need the funding, and so they encouraged us to proceed with the fundraising, but the rest of the stuff I think shouldn't be saying publicly because they need to protect themselves as well.
And we didn't agree that we will tell stuff public also. So.
It's understandable, certainly.
What was the reasoning behind the 5% figure that you decide to airdrop on EOS token holders, and also what is the benefit for you to do that amount in the first place?
I mean, that's a very good question. I'm not sure
So I can answer it maybe through the other way around, which is basically we get sort of compared. The airdrop gets compared to the Everpedia airdrop, which was completely different. And so it comes back to the question that you just put forward, which is the whole idea of Block One related VC funding. And so they basically got the entire funding through EOS VC. We are doing traditional crowdfunding, and so it's a bit different in those terms. And so for us, the 5% was really, our main idea is give something back to the EOS community through the airdrops. That was motivation number one. Motivation number two was, again, our token distribution basically is unlike most of the healthcare projects right now that are doing an ICO, we are distributing 90% of our tokens, so we're only keeping 10%. 90% is going out either through the sale or through airdrops. And so we said that 85% of the tokens will be sold, and then 5% sort of looked like a reasonable number to give out to the community. But I mean, the exact percentages, we can debate whether that should be 3%, 5%, 10, 20%. We thought that 5 was a relatively good number, and we can sort of grow our community with those 5% of the tokens. But yeah, it could be a different number as well. So
yeah, I tell you what I really admire about you guys. Of course, you're trying different styles to do the marketing. Some things work, some things don't. That's understandable. This is all new to everybody, right? The referral codes turned out to be a bit of a mess, like you said. What I do admire is that you guys are going all around to meetups, EOS meetups around the world, and you guys are trying to spread the word. You're trying to help start EOS meetups. So I think that's great. I think you're in Toronto pretty soon.
Yeah.
Is that right?
On Monday, I think Tiasha, who's not here because she's on a conference in Texas right now, but she's organizing that. So I think it's Monday. Yeah.
Okay.
And
cool.
What are your goals in Toronto? Are you trying to hook up with some local businesses there, or just expand the community, let everybody know about Iryo?
More the second. I mean, for business development, we get approached by interested parties quite a lot right now. So with the meetups, it's more about spreading the news about Iryo, meeting with the local EOS communities and so on. And I mean, one of the things that we really believe in is that healthcare is a very specific industry, and so anything that you do in healthcare. In general, in the healthcare industry, reputation goes a long way. And so anything that you do or any shortcuts that you take that will affect the reputation, and that will also make it a lot difficult to grow a business after the crowdfunding. And so what we are trying to do is with the meetups and all of that is to present what we're doing to people live, face to face, because we think that adds, legitimacy to what we're doing. We think we have a good story to tell. We think we compare very good to other healthcare projects. Again, that we're not hiding the fact that there's, it's a crowded space. It's probably more than 70 healthcare projects right now in some way, shape, or form and doing an ICO. But we think that the devil's really in the details, and so that's why we're going out, we're talking to people, and we are doing these lectures on blockchain in healthcare, why EOS, our use cases, and so on, and basically growing the community, explaining to people what we do and what we plan on doing.
I think that's brilliant. I mean, like you said, it definitely have to have that trust. You're dealing with healthcare data here, and what you guys are doing with the face-to-face, and also pioneering just new mechanisms to get your name out there. It's just brilliant. I commend you guys on that.
Yeah, and I have to say that we'll let you guys get to bed here soon. I know it's getting close to midnight now for you guys. I'd like to hear kind of what are the next steps for Iryo? What can EOS community members expect? What are you guys working on next? Give us a little rough timeline.
Right. So we just opened the whitelisting this morning. And so we have 2.5 weeks for whitelisting before the pre-sale starts. And then we have 1 week of pre-sale number 1, then 1 week of pre-sale number 2, and then we have the crowd sale. So that's one thing. The development team, Dominic and his team, are working very hard right now to deploy the first. To make the first deployment happen, which will be in early April. That's the pilot project that we're doing in the refugee camps. Then after that is a deployment for a telemedical company. And then thirdly, we are in talks right now, close to signing a contract with with a network of some healthcare providers, but that's something that we will present publicly, hopefully very soon. There's negotiations ongoing, so that's basically what's going to be happening throughout this year. We obviously have a 5-year or 7-year almost roadmap for other things that we want to develop and support, and so on. And so we think that EOS will deliver what they're saying they will deliver. They will be live in June, July. So when that happens, we still need to make sure that we do a proper token swap, because right now we're going to do the ERC20 on Ethereum. Then we need to do the token swap to get everyone on EOS. And hopefully in a month's time, we'll have the ICO closed, and when we have the funds needed to go ahead with the roadmap that we have planned.
And what should where can people find more about you? Where do you guys recommend that people should go to?
Probably the best 2 sources are either our Telegram group, which is Iryo Network, or the website Iryo.network. And everyone, I mean, all of us are on Telegram all the time, so they can come talk to us whenever, more or less. And yeah, everyone is more than invited to come to the meetups. Like we said, Toronto is next week, so we'll be happy for anyone who joins. And yeah, we also, like we said, we have a special airdrop campaign for people who attend the meetup. So that's a bit of an incentive to come as well.
Sure.
Well, have fun in Toronto, guys. It's one of my favorite cities. So you'll just sign off. And thanks, Luca. Thanks, Vazia. Thanks, Dominic. It's been great.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting us. It was a good interview. So best of luck in your future shows.
Thank you.
Thank you guys very much.
Good luck. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.